So we'll start with these terminologies that we will look at. So there is what is known as class interval. These are groups into which we organize the data. So like from 0 to 9, that is what we call a class interval. The interval is just from 0 to 9, so that is an interval. That is what we are saying. And these are called groups. So in other words, we have how many groups? 1, 2, 3, 4. So for example, here we have 4 groups. So there is group 1 from 0 to 9, then 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to that. So that is what we call an interval. So that interval from 0 to 9 is what is known as an interval. Then we have what is known as the class limits. So now, the class limits, these are the lower and upper values of the class interval as physically shown in the table. So now, these are limits. If the value that is the closing value here is 9 and the next group starts with 10, not starting with the exact figure, then this is what is known as a limit. So these are called class limits. So the limit from 0 to 9. So instead of starting with 9, it starts with 10. So if this number and that number are not the same, these are what we know or what is known as class limits. If the value that's there, and for class limits, if we are putting numbers, if we find 9, 9 is in that group. So automatically even 9 will be in that group. If we find 10, 10 will be in that group. Then we'll look at the different kind of class value that is upper or lower. So the one that is on the left is what is known as the lower, and the one that's on the right is known as the upper class limit. So 9 is the upper class limit, 0 is the lower class limit. Then we have the third terminology, which is class boundary or mathematical limits. These are the lower and upper values of the interval that marks the common point between consecutive class intervals. So we are saying in a case where you have from 0 to 10, then 10 to 20, then 20 to 30, then 30 to 40. So if the value that's there and the value that's there, they are the same, then these are called boundaries. Hope you see the difference between a limit and a boundary. So for the boundary, the values for two consecutive or two consecutive classes, they are the same. The upper boundary for the one that's on top is the same as the boundary for the one that follows. So if we have 10, 10 will belong in this group. So 10 will belong in this group. It will not be here. No, 10 will not be in the class that's on top. It will be in the group that comes after it. Are we together? Is that clear? Hello? Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So those are the terminologies that you have. So you have to know them. You have to know the difference between class boundaries and class limits. So the ones that are on the screen right now, those are class limits. The reason is because the value of the upper closing value of the interval is different from the one that comes in the next group as the open interval. So there you have 9, there you have 10. Then these are limits if those two numbers are different. But if we have 0 to 10 and then you have 10 to 20, if the number that closes the first group is the same as the one that opens the second group, then these are boundaries. So what we have is 9 and 10, those are class limits. Okay, so having done that, we'll progress and go to the next. So now, converting now, how to convert in case whenever you are solving, you have to make sure if you want to make your life easier, you have to make sure if you are given limits, you convert them to boundaries. So what happens is, so for example, the way it is here, you have 0 and you have 9, you have 10, you have 19. So the easier way, there are two ways of doing it. What you can do is, we can add 10 and 9, then find the average. That is what has been done here on top. But I can assure you that there is a easier way of doing that, which you have to know is, on the left, if you have the way it is 0 and to 9, on the left, say plus all the numbers plus 0.5. On the right, sorry. Then on the left, always subtract minus 0.5. Like this, it will be easier for you because this is always what you do. But the other alternative is kuchita had 9 plus 10, then mwasanga average, then you share lava panapa. So like the way they have solved here on top. Let me just increase the font of this guy. So the font of this guy. So if you look at, we want to convert that one. We want to have the class boundaries instead of class limits. So if ishire chitsika fyako bati tuwulire 9 na 10 if twachita had if 9 plus 10 apa 9 plus 10, then you divide by 2, you get 9.5. So it means the first one will be 0 to 9.5. Then since twachita had ne, so nishiyara chitaho penya pa 9.5. Then ukwisa mukusanga iyi twalabula 19 na 20 ifino mwine fikonkanine muli buso mu diagonal. 19 plus 20 twachita had, then divide by 2, we get 19.5. So kunish kwalaba 19.5, then yapalaba 19.5. But then instead of stressing like this, that there is a easier way of doing it, which you have to know that kula itukule chitafe had plus 0.5 always. So yonsama numbers yet kula tukule chitafe plus 0.5. High left yonse ni plus 0.5. Then higher left to ni minus 0.5 minus 0.5. So you find 10 minus 0.5, 9.5. 0 minus 0 minus 0.5, negative 0.5. So you find that if you want to convert the class limits to class boundaries, so remember nganaya pusanama numbers, if this is 9 and that's 10, those are limits. So we are converting limits to boundaries. So what you do, the easier way is just add plus 0.5. You get 9.5, which is this one. Then on the left, just say minus 0.5. So 0 minus 0.5, you get negative 0.5. Uku, you are subtracting 0.5. So 10 minus 0.5, you get 9.5, which is there. Uku 19 plus 0.5, you get 19.5, like that and so on. The frequency won't change. The frequency will just be the same because we are saying those are the numbers that you have. But the boundaries, you are converting the limits to boundaries. Is it clear? Hello? Is it clear? Okay, so silence means note the class boundaries are such that the consecutive classes meet where the upper class boundary of the class interval is the same as the lower class of the next class. This is what I was talking about. Those are class boundaries. Class boundaries should be found only if consecutive class intervals are not meeting. So you can only do that, you can only convert if they are not the same. But in case you are given a question that has already the same, no need for you to convert, you just go direct. In the above frequency table, the class limits were changed to class boundaries by subtracting 0.5 on the left, on the lower limit of the existing class from each lower and adding 0.5 to each upper class limit. Nga fyafine nachalanda ku right kulechitako had, ku left tulechita subtract. Then the class width is numerically the difference between the lower and the upper class boundaries. So take note, don't mistaken this. Not class limits. So for example, twachkwata at 0 to 9, then 10 to 19. Nga mwaisabula ati 9 minus 0, mwarasanga 9 minus 0 yalamipera 9. but that's not our class interval. But nga twachita convert negative 0.5 to 9.5. Nga mwachita subtract ine yalamipera the correct class interval, which will be 9.5 minus negative 0.5. Negative even gives you positive, then it will be 10. And you can see the class interval is 10. But if you use the limits to find, so for the limits, if you want to find so you can get 19 minus 9, you get 10. Or you can get this 10 minus 0. That is if you want to use the limits to find the class interval. But in our class interval to just go direct at 9 minus 0, nishimwa penya. You can only do that if you have the class boundaries. The explanation is to say the class width, area width, natural and the numerical difference between the lower and the upper class boundaries. Take note, it's the boundaries. Ngani boundaries kubula fe ku right minus iri ku left. Nishitakuli ubwafya. But ngani class limit tekwesho kuchitefyo. Nishmwalasanga long answer. So yena ngani class limit like the way it was 0 to 9. Then 10 to 19. Ngamulefo okuchita direct kuchita subtract yabi 19 minus 9. Yalamipera quite right 10. Ngamkweta ma limit. That's how you find the class width. Are we on the same page there? Okay. Twapita. Hii data in higher data ile omfika. Any questions? Then for this one, I personally believe in an example, because if I just start explaining to say step 1 you determine the range, and we know the range is maximum minus minimum value. So nalalondolola using the example. Then step 2, you determine the number of class interval to be shown in the table by getting over the number of class intervals that you desire to have. Then you determine the lower limit of the class interval. Then you construct the frequency table using the tally chart. That's the easier way of grouping the data in case the data is not grouped. I'm sure there is an example. There is an example below which will work with very well. Yeah, this is the example that we are going to work with very well. So the first thing here in our example, they've told us to say, so we want, this is data. Now we want to group this data. To refer to it become a group. Each data to refer to each day group. From the table, we want to group it. Any questions?